you don't have anything to hide, but are you going and publishing your credit card information on social media? No, right? I've tried a bunch of things and been like, nope, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. And using game theory, they showed that how the introduction of that bridge actually increased the traffic. It finds what are the capabilities that LLMs are really not doing well.
Welcome everyone to the Take My Breath Away podcast. And today with us we have Kritika Prakash. And Kritika is one of our co-triple IITians. She studied at triple IT and then went on to work at MSR, Google Open Mind. And one of the interesting things that she works on is differential privacy. She's also very active in the art scene. She's going for a PhD. Today, let's listen from the researcher herself. Welcome, Kritika, to our show.
I
Hello. And on the today, I have with me the co-host Abhinav Venkat,
As always.
as always. All right. Shall we begin with this? Right. So, Kritika, where should we start? So, why don't you start us off with maybe your early part of your life, maybe your childhood, the education. Where did you stay, and what led you to basically triple IT all the way through that?
Okay, it's a long journey, not very straightforward.
Okay.
So I did my nursery level education in Kanpur because my father was an assistant professor at IIT Kanpur, and then because of some health conditions, we all moved to Bangalore,
I see.
and all my primary and secondary and high school education till 12th grade happened in Bangalore. So that actually helped me with having like this mixed cultural upbringing where I can appreciate, I don't know, a lot of South Indian cultures as well. Um, yeah, so that's like a lesser known thing that because of my surname, also people kind of misinterpret that maybe I'm a South Indian, but originally I'm from UP. And after 12 years of school education in Bangalore, I uh, appeared for JEE mains. And through that, I joined this college called IIIT-DM Kanchipuram.
Kanchipuram.
And this is in Chennai. Yeah.
I see. Yep. Yep.
So there, I was in the electronics branch in my first year. But luckily, for 1 year, all the courses were common, and so across all branches. And so by the end of first year, I transferred to the computer science branch in my second year at Kanchipuram. And it wasn't like I wanted to join computer science from the very beginning. I genuinely wanted to join electronics.
Mm-hmm.
But then over a period of 1 year, I found electronics to be too hard and computer science to be much more interesting. So I shifted to computer science in my second year at Kanchipuram.
Mm-hmm.
And then through my father and through some professors at Kanchipuram, I got to know of this opportunity called lateral entry. That's a
Mm-hmm.
mode of admission at IIIT-Hyderabad. And I just applied for it and I prepared for it using all the GATE exam papers. I just gave a lot of GATE exam papers. And there was a written round and an interview round, and I qualified. So, without really knowing the too much detail about what all would be required to complete my master's thesis, I joined IIIT Hyderabad as a dual degree student,
I see.
where I started off in my second year. So I had to repeat my second year and,
Mm-hmm.
did my coursework for bachelor's for 3 years. And after that, started working on my master's thesis. And then the pandemic hit, so, things got delayed. And then I came to Bangalore again and I graduated, like I completed my thesis and my defense and everything remotely during the pandemic. So
Yeah, there's actually a lot of things that.
that's the journey.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
It's
this
a
is
long journey.
pretty long
Yeah.
indeed. I
Yeah.
mean, even first of all,
Yeah.
you traveled all the way from the north to the south. You basically have an exposure to both the cultures, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
actually made the same assumption that you're actually from the south just because of your surname. And
Yeah.
I
but is it?
Yes.
I don't know. Like, is it
I didn't know
common, the
that
Prakash
Prakash is
surname?
even a South Indian surname. To be honest with you
It's
guys,
not.
yeah.
No, it
Okay.
is a South Indian surname. It's
Okay.
not a North Indian surname. My actual surname would have been Srivastav, but my dad's
Uh-huh.
name is Prakash, so I got my
Okay.
surname from
Yeah.
him.
Acha.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's
Got
a whole
it.
confusing mess, but I don't mind it.
No, no, it's
Got it.
good. So can you speak Kannada then, like fluently?
No, no,
No, it's
I can't. But
Well,
I can
typically.
speak a little bit of Telugu. Yeah.
Oh, Telugu, yeah. How did you pick up Telugu
Yeah.
though? Because
okay.
while you were in Reply to you, or was it due to some other influence? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. But during college, because I had Telugu speaking friends. So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's an
Mm.
interesting thing. Actually, this is I think you're the first person I'm hearing who's picked up Telugu like
In
this late
college.
and yeah, this late in life. Usually, like all the people
Yeah.
that I know, including myself, have picked up Telugu through this, sort of
Because I
passively.
lived
Is
there,
why
or
yeah,
yeah.
is during the childhood. It's like for instance, I never studied
Mm.
Telugu, but because I like people, there were people I was going to school, and they were all around people who speaking Telugu. I just picked up parts of it, and
Yeah, yeah. The same thing happened to me. Like being
yeah.
surrounded by Telugu speaking friends, you just pick it up. I'm sure mine is not half as good as what you can speak, but still,
Oh no, no,
I think I can have
trust me. I
a
get looks
basic
even now
conversation.
when I speak. And like so people really don't like, especially with my name and the way I look, people really don't think that I have lived for any considerable time in South India. So I remember this shortly in Reply itself, right? Then so after the at the end of the first semester, Vatika, like our batchmate, she came up to me and she was like, flights book करते हैं. लाइक कि फ्लाइट्स कि फ्लाइट्स की बुक करना है इसलिए कोलकाता जाना है ना आई थिंक नो आई स्टे हियर इन हैदराबाद and like, and then the look when so a lot of people when people are talking and they're talking conversing in Telugu and all of a sudden I
And you can
interject.
conveniently eavesdrop.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm always there. Okay, they are talking in Telugu. The look on their face is priceless when they realize all of a sudden that ये तेलुगु बोल रहा है.
You can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. Yes.
Yes. So even
Yeah.
so,
Nice.
one thing that you touched upon, right? Even the lateral entry bit. So to be honest with you, I didn't know about that mode of admission until I joined Triple IT. So one thing that you mentioned was you had to give the gate examination, right? So is that like the
No,
stand,
no,
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 no.
no.
or you were
I had
preparing
to
using
give
the gate?
the lateral entry exam, but they
Okay.
mentioned on their website or Quora answers or something that
Mm-hmm.
the questions are very similar to GATE questions.
I see.
So
I
I
see.
prepared using GATE papers. Yeah.
Okay. And is there something that
Yeah.
for someone who might be listening and maybe they are looking to, explore this option, is there something that you would tell them to keep in mind, something that might not be publicly available?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is that you should go through the curriculum, the list of courses that they mention that are going to be part of the lateral entry exam, because a lot of universities might not cover that much syllabus
Mm-hmm.
by the end of
Mm.
second year. So, you some subjects, like I had to do the same thing, maybe two or three subjects I had to study on my own, even though they would have come up later in my education at Kanchipura. So I had to pick them up on my own, and so that I'm ready for the lateral entry
Okay.
exam.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
One thing I'm curious about is all of us are, we all have this constant path, right? That is pretty much laid out for us probably till we are, I don't know, 24 or 25 or so.
Yeah.
And even during that path, having to like redo a year, so that kind of like would, I don't know, at least if I were in your place, it would like induce significant amount of FOMO that several of my batchmates and so many of them who I've kind of grown up with, they are kind of 1 year ahead. I mean, it's a different
Right.
story that you're probably caught up right now. And of course, later on in life, we do have that maturity that it's all immaterial. 1 year here or there, it doesn't
Yeah.
really make that much of a difference. But like, how difficult was it for you, right? When you knew that, when you came to know that you have to kind of redo a year and retake all these subjects and like new batchmates and whatnot.
Okay. So you mentioned multiple of the aspects which I was going to talk about. One of them being that, repetition of syllabus, redoing a few courses like algorithms and data structures that I had already done. So initially, I wasn't too worried. I was like, let's just go with the flow. But when I did do those courses at IIIT Hyderabad, I was grateful that I did them because they were just of much more rigor. The the level expectation in assignments and coursework, it was more intense. That was my experience. So to me, it felt like I'm not really losing time. I'm just learning more. And Am I frozen? No. Okay.
No, no.
So that was the mindset that I went in with. Like when I had to make the choice of whether I should leave Kanchipuram, whether I should stay in Kanchipuram or I should join Hyderabad, the question was, what is the best use of my time? And the best use of my time, one path would be to wait to complete that education over there, and go for a master's maybe in the US or whatever. That would be an equally good path, maybe, or I don't know about equal, but it would still be a really good path. And the other path would be to come to Hyderabad and go through the whole research experience. And so, what I really thought at that time was that how can I make the best use of my time in the next 1 or 2 years? It's
Okay.
not really about the end goal, that how quickly can I get to a job, or what is the best job I can get to or something. It was about how I can maximize the amount of stuff I'm learning at the current time. And so I thought that there was more learning potential from the coursework and the research environment at Hyderabad. So that's why I just came there.
I
So
see.
that
And
was
I'm
the
kind of
reason. Yeah.
wondering that people don't tend to have this outlook usually at that young of an age.
Hmm.
Did your father, being a professor, at IIT Kanpur, and his kind of academic background and so on, have bring that maturity to you? What kind of
Yeah,
an effect did that play?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, like I wouldn't have even applied if it weren't for him. So, uh, definitely talking to him and understanding his perspective on things, and just having that sense of calm that, you're not going to lose out in life just because you might take things a little slower, or if you're more deliberate in like thinking about your options, or like
Choices.
reconsidering your choices. So that really did help, that influence. Yeah, that really helped. And also, there was this one professor at Kanchipuram who was like my mentor. He still is. And, despite him being a professor at Kanchipuram, he urged me to go to Hyderabad. So, and he really helped me prepare for the interview. And he told me about the kind of research I could be exposed to if I went there. So that really helped me because I just trusted his opinion a lot. And he pushed me to kind of go for like this risky thing. And yeah, the other factor was the friendship part. That was hard. Like I had a solid friend group in Kanchipuram, and it was honestly the first time that I was so social because my entire school life I was pretty shy and introverted, and then something changed, and suddenly I became like a more outgoing person in college, and you know, uh, got to connect more with people, and people actually enjoyed my company as well. So that was a pretty hard thing to do. And I did struggle with like finding friends in the first semester at IIIT Hyderabad because all the groups were already
Sure.
formed.
Right.
Formed.
Right.
So so that was hard, but I think it was like, to me it was like I had to do this to grow in the way I wanted to. So,
Makes sense. Makes sense. You actually touched upon this. I was going to
Nice.
ask
Yeah.
this. Like, what was your first impression when you came in? Because normally we know that as you're joining as a fresher, there's a whole orientation program that's planned to ease you in, and
Correct.
everyone's like sort of new to the environment, right? But through for a lateral entry, then you're entering. Basically, you have to hit the ground running of sorts,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Yeah.
it's this kind of a thing.
yeah,
I've always felt that a lot of people who are lateral entries, at least like several from our batch, uh, they did find it quite tough to be a part of like any single group, like you mentioned, right? Because a
yeah,
lot of groups had already kind of been formed, and several times I kind of did see that they are fairly isolated.
mm,
And that can be like really, really tough, right? Because college is this place that you really want to connect and uh, enjoy, make friends, so on and so forth. So,
yeah.
um, yeah. It's a tough choice. A tough choice. I'm not sure. Like I would have taken the same choice. Uh, I'd probably have stayed at the previous place.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it just felt like a natural time for me to make that transition because I felt like everything that I could learn from Kanchipuram, I took that in. I already like took a lot of it in. So yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Makes sense. Makes sense. Moving on from there, like 1 year down the line, you have to choose a lab, and you have to kind of get into you like you mentioned, right? You had no idea of what research would actually entail when you kind of
yeah,
started off. So
yeah.
how did that journey kind of start off, that you want to get into cryptography, ML, or along those lines?
Okay, so I would say that was a little bit of like misrepresentation on my part. I did have a little bit of idea of what research is like because when I was in Chennai, I did work on a graph theory research problem. I was just
Hmm.
assisting a PhD student, and
Okay.
that project, like it went nowhere. Like in terms of my contribution, it didn't really go anywhere. But I got that
Hmm.
taste of okay, I can go deeper into something, and I can try to find like a counterexample or whatever. So that was quite
Hmm.
fun. And then there was this one other event that happened when I was in 11th grade. Uh, there's like here in Bangalore, there's this amazing institute called the Indian Institute of Science.
Hmm.
So I had visited IISc for an open day. They had an open house day
Okay.
when I was in 11th grade. And all the labs, not just computer science, all these labs were showcasing their like really cool experiments and research results and all of that. So that was like a very, very fun day, which kind of just created this etching in my memory. I
Hmm.
always remembered that. So in the computer science lab, there was one lab where people were working on game theory, and
Okay.
they created this interesting simulator of how there's two roads going from A to B and B to A, and there's a lot of traffic in them. But then if you create a bridge between these two roads, you would think that the traffic would decrease because they're really long roads. And that's the purpose of these sort of bridges in between, where people don't have to go all the way to take a U-turn, right? So it was some example like that. And using game theory, they showed that how the introduction of that bridge actually increased the traffic. So that to me was very fascinating. And then there were like the games like the Prisoner's Dilemma, which they had made simulations of. So I got to play the Prisoner's Dilemma with other people who were visiting. So that to me, it was just like the most fascinating thing that there is this element of strategy and games that you can work with. And when I joined IIIT Hyderabad, I used to do this thing that whenever I got free time, I would just go inside Vindhya. KCIS didn't exist that time. So I would
Right.
just walk into Vindhya. I'd start from the SERC lab, and I would, whoever was there, I would just go talk to them, like, what are you working on? Or try to read the posters just to get a better idea of the research happening. And I've gotten lost so many times in that building, I cannot tell you. Even till date, I do not know how to get to SH1 and SH2. So this, yeah, yeah. So that's what I did, and so the semester that I joined, my first semester, I did a small project with Kishore Kotapalli just to get an idea of what that parallel programming kind of thing might be like if I were to work in complexity theory and algorithms. So I thought that the C star lab would be the place for me because of my kind of theoretical interests. And then I tried that project and I didn't really enjoy it. So then in the second semester of my second year, I had this course called Artificial Intelligence by Praveen Parchuri. And I saw that, I took that and I was just like, yeah, this is it. And then I got to know that this other professor, Sujit Gujar, actually works in game theory. So that's how I was like, yeah, this is the lab that I'm going to. It's not so deeply theoretical that I would just get buried in it, but I also get to maybe apply it and have some fun with it, and also get to do a bit of theory. And that is what even differential privacy is like a lot. Like that is one of the most attractive things about differential privacy to me, that it's theoretical, there's proving, there's math, but there's also like it's heavily being applied in so many places in society now. So yeah, that hopefully that sums it up.
This is very interesting because essentially for me, for the first 3 semesters, even though I was like, I mean, I had taken computer science in my 11th and 12th. And sorry, yeah, Debayan seems all right. Yeah. So I had taken computer science in my 11th and 12th, and algorithms and extent of data structures was limited, but algorithms are essentially very interesting. So I decided, hey, I got to do computer science. But in my first 3 semesters, I was just so bored. I was literally bored. I was like, oh god, databases, operating system. It was not hitting me. And then it was the same fourth semester. It was basically the AI course, optimization methods, not optimization. What was it? Java Search course, right?
DIP,
Digital signal
DIP,
processing.
DSP,
Not
DSP,
D.
Yeah.
Java Search, Java Search,
Yeah.
Digital Signal
Just first
Processing.
course,
Yeah,
the first course, and then I was like, yeah, it's got to be CBIT. That's like,
yeah,
even if you look at my marks, my grade sheet, my first 3 semesters are like, this guy doesn't want to be here, and then my last 5 semesters are like, I don't know, it's not the same person, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I can kind of relate with you that when you have that click that this is where you have to be,
Yeah.
then everything just falls in place.
yeah, yeah. So what I was going to ask about this, right? Because you mentioned the AI course, Praveen sir's course, right? So did he play that nuclear alarm
Yeah,
in
he
your
did.
class?
Oh, oh boy, oh
That
boy.
is
He
like,
didn't, yeah. He didn't play it
I,
every class, maybe 3, 4 classes, but it was really
yeah, yeah,
fun.
it
Yeah.
comes out of the blue. It's like he's presenting his slides, and all of a sudden he moves to one slide, and there's like a, I don't know, crazy ass siren blaring in your room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he has a very different sense of humor. Like he was my primary advisor all these years. So I really know that side of him now.
the unfortunate
Right.
part is, it's okay if it is an alarm just in class. Several people, they were like, we just can't get up in the morning, so that became their alarms in the morning. And just because that became their alarm, it didn't change anything. So I would be like, guys, you gotta switch off the alarm. You're waking me up. You know. So
Yeah.
that was the unfortunate part about that alarm.
Wow. He
Yeah.
inspired that alarm.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, people
Oh
have
yeah.
been using that. I think the
At,
nuclear alarm after
yeah, a
that.
lot of people have been using that, and oh god.
I think I also set my alarm to that nuclear tone for some time. I did do that for some time. Though I did wake
quite
up, so
quite
there's
possible.
different. Yeah, yeah.
I made this mistake this year, maybe a couple months ago. I thought that if I really pick a very upbeat song, to wake up
Hmm.
to, then I would love waking up. Uh, now I hate
Been
that
there.
song.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
The moment, so I tried the same thing, and the moment something like that came up, immediately I was like, "Who is so happy in the morning?" You know.
Right.
So
I mean, I
I
think
can
Yeah.
relate.
the easiest
Well,
way for you to hate a song or to desensitize yourself to a song is to set it as an alarm. That's
Yeah.
the shortcut way
yeah,
that you stop
set it
responding
on the
to it for
background
sure.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So the coming back to the thing that you're discussing, right? This was, I think, where we were at. Yeah. So you decided on basically Praveen sir and Sujit sir as your guides. And so how were you introduced to differential privacy? Was that the thing that you started working on from the beginning, or were you working on something else?
I tried a bunch of things. Like
Hmm.
I have breadth in research because I've tried a bunch of things and been like, nope, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. So initially, I just joined under Praveen sir. I didn't even have the concept of a co-advisor at the time.
Mhm.
Sujit sir came in maybe 1.5 years later into the picture. So initially, I just joined Praveen sir, and I was reading some papers in optimization, like MDP related optimization
Hmm.
papers, and it it was interesting. But then suddenly there was this whole craze in the students in my lab about reinforcement learning. So I told Praveen sir that I also want to do a bit of reinforcement learning. So I just started watching a bunch of RL lecture videos and trying out my hand at some reinforcement learning. Um, And things were very uncertain at the time. Nothing was fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Then my senior Aditya Srinivas, he was getting closer to publishing a paper and preparing for it. So Praveen sir decided that he wants to put me on that project so that I get the whole experience of pushing a paper to a conference. So I worked with him on automated negotiation. Uh, it's
Okay.
the whole bargaining thing and how you can compute that and how you can come up with an optimal strategy for negotiation in a multiplayer setting or different settings. So that was maybe my first solid project with Praveen sir. After that, it was time for me to find something to work on for my own thesis. And another senior of mine, Sushobhan Ghosh, he was graduating then with this work in power trading, for reinforcement learning, for power trading, energy power trading. And so I joined that project because it was like, the lab needs someone to work on that project. And I clearly don't have a problem. So, and it's reinforcement learning, the thing I was interested in. So I joined that project. And that was the time when Sujit sir became my co-advisor, because he was also working with Sushobhan at the time. He was Sushobhan's co-advisor. So I kind of followed along in Sushobhan's path. And I worked on that project for quite some time. And we did come up with some new strategies and some new implementations, but uh, maybe it was a little temperamental of me, but I just didn't feel like working on it after some time, just dealing with that really, really dated Java code base and spinning up like so many servers and everything. It was a pretty frustrating thing to do. So later on, after some time, uh, when Sujit sir became my co-advisor, about the same time, I started taking independent studies. So I wanted to reduce my coursework load, and I also wanted to just do more research. So I converted three course worth credits into independent studies, and I took two with Sujit sir, and I took one with Praveen sir. And so, Sujit sir and I were just brainstorming that what can we do an independent study on? What are my interests and what are his interests, and where can we find some commonality? So he told me that, when he was a PhD student at IISc, he came across this field of differential privacy and it's very interesting. And he asked me to go read the textbook. So that's it. That's how I got into differential privacy. I did it for 2 semesters. I worked on it for 2 semesters as independent studies. And I just really loved it. It was like very, very interesting to me. I think I also enjoyed really thinking about the sociological aspects of privacy. You could say that there's this mathematical notion of privacy, and you could apply it to this algorithm or this data science pipeline. But what does it really mean? What does it translate to when you're using it, or for the people who are using it, or the people whose data is being used? What does it mean for them? So understanding or explaining or being able to interpret privacy, that was also very interesting to me. And then after that, during the pandemic, I picked up my final problem, which was privacy and reinforcement learning. So, everything kind of just came together. And yeah, I was like, let's try to understand differential privacy in the context of reinforcement learning. And it was a completely unexplored field. Like there were few papers on differential privacy in RL, and there was one privacy attack. And so I was like, I want to attack privacy in RL, and I want to see how far I can get and how much I can test differential privacy in RL. So that was my entire master's thesis. So even though I have 3 publications in my time at IIIT-Hyderabad, all 3 of them are completely disconnected.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
This is
that's kind of yeah.
that's also the kind of thing, right? You really like, especially in something as open-ended as research, like you really don't know what your heart will come to. Like you try out so many different things and you talk to so many different people, and the spark goes
Yeah.
off at some point.
Yeah.
And for you, it was differential privacy. So for our
Yeah.
listeners, right, could you explain to them what differential privacy means?
Okay, yeah. So there's a field called computational privacy where you're trying to do a lot of these computational tricks, using which you can guarantee privacy to the users who are using some database, or maybe it's their data that's in the database that's being used for some machine learning model, for example. So within the field of computational privacy, there have been many things in the past, like anonymity and a bunch of techniques in the past. But none of them have been able to capture or give you a guarantee which is mathematical, like a mathematical guarantee of privacy that, I'm able to get zero point 0.5 privacy or 1 privacy in terms of some metric. So that's where differential privacy comes in. Differential privacy is like the golden mathematical worst case guarantee of privacy. So even in the worst case possible, what privacy guarantee can you give me about this model or this pipeline or whatever? So this is still very abstract, but if you want to go like into like the details of it, or to really get an intuitive understanding, imagine that you use a database which say contains Abhinav's data as well, to train an ML model or to get or for some query, SQL query, anything. Now, if I were to remove Abhinav's data from this database entirely, I'm going to get a different query output, right? So with Abhinav's data in the database, my query output would be X, and without Abhinav's data, my query output would be X prime. So how different are X and X prime? If they're vastly different, they might be able to tell us a lot about Abhinav, or the person that was missing in the data set, in the second data set. So this is the concept of the differential, that if you remove one person from a database, what effect does that have on the output of the query? And how can you measure the sensitivity of the query to the difference in the input? And when you get that sort of sensitivity, what does that tell you about who this person was who is missing in the database? So the goal is that somebody who's using an ML model as a black box, they should not be able to tell whose data it was trained on. And so the way to do that is, in this very like differential sort of way, that you train a model with Abhinav's data and without Abhinav's data. Can you infer from these two query results that the person who is missing is Abhinav?
I see. And differential privacy deals with techniques to ensure that you have some sort of privacy, that it is your model training is resilient to such attacks.
Exactly. Yeah. So this attack is called the membership inference attack, which is the backbone of differential privacy. And the techniques in DP, in differential privacy, essentially, they are going to adulterate the process. They're going to add noise to maybe the training of the model or to the input data or some other step in the future. And they're going to do it in the smartest way possible. They're going to add the least amount of noise in the smartest way possible, which gives you a guarantee that you will not be able to distinguish these two distributions of data with and without Abhinav. So, and you can, the best part is you can calibrate how much privacy you want. Do you want like really strong privacy? So your epsilon is 0.001. You want weak privacy, maybe your epsilon is 0.1 or 2 or 3. So that mathematical calibration is really helpful.
So actually, so you use this term, right? The membership inference attack. So can you give a little more example maybe? So this is essentially that you're using some sort of attack on the machine learning model to infer about the person whose data is there in the training data, right? So this is one kind
in
of
the
attack.
data set.
Yes. So what are the other kinds of attacks which are related to privacy that might be done in a machine learning context?
Yeah, so one attack is the data reconstruction attack. So till now, we were only trying to figure out, is this person, the membership of a single person in the data, is that person there in the data or not? That's all. But when it comes to data reconstruction, you're actually trying to reconstruct input data fields. If you're given, say, an incomplete record, this is their age, this is their height, this is their weight. Can you tell me whether they have cancer, whether they have diabetes, whether they have these things? So that is another really important attack, which is the data reconstruction attack, which is like even more you could have multiple data entries about the same person as well. So it's an even more fine-grained kind of attack.
And how does this happen usually? Do you have some examples or maybe some technique that the attackers would use to do this?
So generally, a lot of these attacks are sort of reverse engineering attacks. They will try to like what they'll try to do is one attack in for data reconstruction is the model inversion attack. So your original model, given an input, it gives you a certain output. Model inversion attack, it tries to create a model where, given an output, you're able to come up with the input for it. So that's
Okay.
like a really big one. Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering. So you said it's a lot like adding noise in order to improve privacy, right?
Yeah.
But being an ML guy, noise kind of screws up my accuracy, right?
Yeah.
I'd like my data to be as clean as possible. So all of these various methods that you kind of are talking about, like what is their kind of impact um, on the performance of these models?
Right. So naturally, there is a privacy and accuracy trade-off, or more generally speaking, privacy utility trade-off. That the
Okay.
utility of your model does go down, is heavily impacted if you go for like very strong
Okay.
definition of privacy, or you add a lot of noise in the training process.
Mhm.
But it is not just so straightforward that if you improve the privacy, the model becomes a worse model. It's not as simple as that. There
Okay.
is the nuance of generalization. So it depends on how well your model is generalizing to begin with. Your model could be a model that's really overfitting, and that's why your accuracy is high. That's why your utility is high. But in the truest sense, then that is not the model that you're looking for. So in some
Mhm.
cases, this has actually been observed that when you do add privacy, you add privacy noise to the process of the training of a model. Even though your accuracy during training might go down, it actually helps improve generalization. So it can give you a boost in the final utility of the model.
Sure.
And these things, empirically, they're hard to, always emulate correctly. But there are theoretical proofs which show that privacy does support generalization of ML models. And so it's kind of like thinking about the robustness of machine learning models. You're trying to
Mhm.
make your ML model robust to all sorts of attacks. So privacy just
Right.
falls within the purview of those set of attacks that you would want to be robust.
Right. Right.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Actually, so we have this thing, which is kind of I can kind of put it in a different context where there is this dropout mechanism in neural networks, right? Which is
Yeah.
also essentially kind of a noise mechanism, and that ends up improving the generalization. So what you're saying is
Yeah.
a lot like that. At least that's how I kind of contextualize it.
Yeah, I mean, that's
So
a really good observation because there is an inherent privacy that you get with Dropout. So
Mm.
there's a paper
Mm.
which talks about the privacy that you get for free because of Dropout or
I see.
L2 regularization and things like
Okay.
that. And a few transformations also, the Johnson-Linen-Strauss transformation and things like that,
I see.
that give you privacy for free. So yeah, there is like good theoretical work on that.
So basically, there's a
Interesting.
correlation between generalizable, the generalization of the model with the privacy that it inherently has.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I'm
But it's
hearing it
really
right.
hard to show this in experiments because training is very like non-deterministic stochastic.
Mm.
So unless
Right.
you're working with huge hyperparameter sweeps, it can be pretty hard to
Mm.
Right.
show
Right.
these results that, there's this direct correlation. Yeah.
Right.
Mm. Mm.
So this
Yeah.
is
Right.
actually the one thing that I wanted to touch upon here,
Sorry.
right? Because go
Yeah.
ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, no, I was just thinking, so this correlation that you're talking about, is it like this generalization and improving this whole thing with privacy? Um, is it specific to the kind of ML model? Because certain kinds of models by themselves are very hard to train, right? Like generative models, like a lot of GANs and stuff like that, they are really, really tough to train. And I don't know, like, yeah, exactly. So how does this whole privacy, is it specific to maybe certain kinds of models?
Um, so conceptually, it should hold true for many models, for many classes of models. But like you said, the reality is that some models are much, much harder to train than others.
Hmm.
There, I'm not really sure about the result
Okay.
in terms of privacy and generalization. But one thing that is definitely non-trivial is that for any kind of ML model that you work with, uh, different classes, different mechanisms, different algorithms, the way you come up with the private version of that algorithm, that is non-trivial. So you really have to kind of do the work of coming up with a privacy mechanism and proving that it actually gives you this guarantee. So that is the part which is not like very easy to automate. You can't just uh, you
Okay,
can't just like make a computer to do that, for
got
example.
it.
That is something that
Got
can be
it.
tricky. So but one work that did come out in that, in to improve that, was like DP versions of, or private versions of optimizers. So no matter which
Okay,
class of ML algorithm you're training, you're going to use one of these basic optimizers, SGD, Adam,
right.
whatever. So they have private versions of those optimizers. So that was like a really big deal in the privacy community, that they came up with DP-SGD, DP Adam. Yeah.
Got
Yeah,
it. Got it.
this is
One
actually
thing I want to
interesting.
understand is so sorry, I'm completely like, at least Devan watched the video. I have no idea, so I have a ton of questions. Privacy, you said there is certain kind of guarantee that you can actually give. So what do you mean by guarantee? Like, how is it exactly quantified?
Okay, so generally there's this notion of
Okay.
epsilon guarantee, which is a characterization of differential
Okay.
privacy. So they say that this algorithm makes this model epsilon differentially private, and epsilon is typically in the range of 0.01 till 10 for
Okay.
meaningful privacy. And so the smaller the value, the tighter the privacy, or the stronger the privacy. And the way it's defined is that I told you about the two distributions, right? Two input distributions. One is with your data in it, and one is without. So for any person in that data set, the divergence between the two distributions, output query distributions, for this person, for the data with and without their record, that divergence of those two distributions is upper bounded by e to the power of epsilon. So that's the conceptual thinking, that whatever output distribution you have for a query, for any person in the data set, if you remove their record, you'll get two distributions, right? With their record, without their record. The
Right.
divergence between these two distributions is upper bounded by e to the power of epsilon.
Okay.
And that is a measure of basic that's a way of quantifying the privacy that this
Yeah.
method can have.
Yeah.
I see.
So the smaller the divergence, the tighter the privacy, which is why the smaller the epsilon, the tighter the privacy. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, this is something that I
Makes
wanted to
sense.
touch upon because this is something that, like, until now, what we've been discussing about is the mathematical aspect of it, right? From a statistical point of view, how do you quantify certain stuff, the different concepts. But what many people might want to know is what are some real world applications where this can apply, right? For instance, one of the I remember a couple of examples that you mentioned in your seminar. One of them was about the smoking one, that kind of a risk,
Yeah.
where privacy
Yeah.
would matter, and the other one was the voting one, for instance. So maybe you could,
Yeah.
if you could shed some light on that, for especially for Abhinav, because he's not seen it, so he's basically new to this.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just have to think about how in practically most applications, there can be an element of, okay, somebody's data here, if it gets leaked, that would be problematic in most applications. It could even be something as innocuous and as simple as, who are the people who are visiting this cafe at different times of the day. So really, you're not, say, I visit some cafe and I every day I visit it at 3 p.m. That kind of pattern, that should not be explicitly known to other people, because that could pose as a safety risk. So it's it is true in many scenarios. So especially in the field of healthcare, uh, you want people to do more research on rare types of cancer, rare diabetes, all these rare diseases also. And so you want these data, which maybe there's just 50 patients around the world going through some disease. So you do want to collect all of that data and you want to, do data science on it, or you want the doctors to analyze it. But you don't want people to get to know whose data it is because, say, it gets leaked that this X person has this disease. The first thing that will go up for them is their insurance premium.
Mm.
Insurance companies
Right.
will capitalize on that. Uh,
Right.
for example, say you're building some sort of self-driving autonomous robot cars or whatever. Now, it's obviously going to have a video feed. It's going to, look at the roads, look at the surroundings, everything. But if it's memorizing, if that model is memorizing things like, okay, I saw this person outside this, I don't know, it could be anything. It could be a pharmacy, it could be anything. That could get them in trouble, right? So locally, we don't care. We don't care who's around us when we're doing things because those people don't know us. But the minute this is indexable and accessible by the internet, people can exploit that. So it could be the most like uh, simple or innocent of things that could pose a safety threat to you, that could pose a lot of threats to your personal data and to your personal life. Like the same way with say you're working in the voting domain, right? You really want that kind of information to be private, because idealistically we think, yeah, there's the ballot is hidden and all of that, but there are constituencies where there's major crime happening around elections and voting, and people are really forced to vote for a certain party. So it's really important to be able to have that privacy and like have that sustained in the long term.
So maybe you could
What?
give
Yeah,
an
makes sense.
example of like one way in which the voting, one strategy in which privacy could be achieved in the voting context, right? The example of the 50% one. Maybe you can touch upon that. Like, in how do you ensure some semblance of privacy in a case where people are voting?
Okay, I'll have to remember that randomized response example again. I'm a little bit like
Mm-hmm.
hazy about it at the moment. But like the idea is that, later on, if at some point somebody wants to release these voting records publicly online for data science purposes, for example, then if you just remove the names of people from that data set, that might not be enough. There might be other identifiers of who this person is, based on the time they visited the poll and the vote they cast and all those things. So it's not just to anonymize a data set. It's not just sufficient to anonymize a data set. You really have to go above and beyond and really, sanitize the data set in a way that it does not leak information about people, sensitive information. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the strategies that was proposed in that was that a simple strategy that if basically, yeah, you pick a random number x, and if the number is odd then the person answers truthfully, and if it
Yeah.
is even then they basically answer randomly. So you can,
Right.
so it's not directly like there's no direct correlation with the output to the person who's answering that, because the probabilities are different. That is
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is
So
what at
that's the
least I remember.
Right. Yeah. So that's the property of randomized response mechanism, which is a very simple version of differential privacy with a fixed budget. It has an epsilon of 1.1,
1.1.
where
Yeah.
it gives you this property of plausible deniability. No matter what you said in the survey, or if you're filling some survey, that's generally in the survey scenario, no matter what you said, nobody can hold you accountable for that because there is this 50% probability with which you gave a random answer and 50% with which you actually answered
Actually,
truthfully.
I said the right thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
yeah.
sense. I recall something that we read along these lines in um, Professor Kannan's course. I don't know, Deban, did
Mhm.
you take that course, Information
Yeah,
Security?
yeah.
I did
Uh,
not. I did not.
yeah, so
I
that
took
was
the
one
course.
course
Hmm,
which I absolutely loved, but unfortunately, I just couldn't explore that more. And then, same thing, game theory as well. It was an elective. As one
yeah,
of the very few students who probably took that elective, I think it was Sujit sir's first semester when he had joined.
right.
And most of the people who had taken that course, largely were his students, and in and around. But again, very very fascinating. Same, like going off the whole prisoner's dilemma, and I, you talking through all this is kind of bringing back those memories. So yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
this. Um,
No,
Yeah.
I
one,
love those courses
it's
too, especially like principles of information
this
security.
is
Yeah.
like a personal masterclass for me, because Debayan's watched stuff regarding what you have done, but I can directly question you and understand what I want to understand, right? So that's awesome. One thing
So
that's kind of coming to my mind in all of these privacy mechanisms. I'm just wondering, uh, is it a little bit idealistic, in the sense that sometimes you're put in maybe this is not in specific to like machine learning models or the data that they expose, right? But privacy as a larger concept, sometimes it's a little difficult not to divulge certain types of information, right? So I'm just trying to understand if there exists some mathematical modeling where you have to divulge some kind of information, and in those cases, is it okay to give away less important data, right? Like, is there a bias in the privacy system itself that is sometimes built in?
Okay, this is like
I
a
don't know.
meta question. Uh, so that's true that differential privacy is not going to cover all the kind of cases we're looking at, because this is the worst case guarantee. We're trying to see that in the extreme worst case, the toughest of situations, also, how much information are you leaking? Um, and this especially works better with numerical data. Like I've been working on it in the language domain at MSR, and it's a mess. It's just a huge mess to work on privacy in language.
Okay.
And but yeah, there is also this field called confidentiality, where
Right.
sometimes the thing that you have to work with is the sensitive information. You're not trying to hide it away, you're trying to work with it. So, how can you create an environment, like a trusted execution environment, where you can safely work with people's sensitive data in a confidential way or an encrypted way? So, another like fellow research person at MSR who was also under the same manager, she was working on this confidentiality project where you actually have an encrypted server where you kind of pump all the data there, and all the computation and everything happens on that server using multi-party computation and other techniques. And there might be a little bit of differential privacy too for the output part. And then they return the whole thing back to you. So this is a whole other kind of use case that you want the sensitive data. But differential privacy is you're trying to hide away or you're trying to protect the sensitive data.
so
Yeah,
here you'll use sharding or you'll use eyes of training techniques and those kind of things to help do it. This is exactly what
I hear that.
no, this actually sounds very similar to the kind that I was mentioning earlier, right? The one which is done in this enterprise search and all of that. This is
Right,
exactly the thing
right,
that where you need the person's data, but you cannot look at it. The model can
right.
access
Yeah,
it, and it has to be like sharded away in different tenants and has to be trained on separately.
yeah.
But you can only look at the output. You cannot look at it during the training phase or
Training
even during
stage.
the inference.
Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's like,
Yeah, but and in terms of like whether there is maybe like a bias for less private, maybe things that don't need to be privatized become privatized. I don't think that's true, because in this adversarial attack literature, the attack is pretty targeted. They'll tell you that this is the sensitive information that you're trying to attack, you're trying to extract. And so you put all your efforts to kind of only hide that. And the beauty of the statistical nature of all of this is that you find correlations, that you're trying to hide this sensitive field, but there's this other field which is highly correlated with the sensitive field. So now you know that you have to work on that other field too. So it's kind of like in a need basis. Yeah, that's what my understanding of your question is. I've answered according to that.
one thing
Okay.
that
Okay.
is like really, which really intrigued me, right, is this thing that you touched upon, that privacy, the concept of privacy is very different, and when you're dealing with or the challenge of it is very different when you're dealing with something like numerical data versus when you shift to the probably the language domain. Can you
Yeah.
explain that a bit more? What did you mean by that?
Okay. So the first is it's just thinking about the medium of expression itself, forget machine learning. When you're working with, say, some tabular data or numerical data, you are explicitly told that this is a field that corresponds to this person, and it's quantified numerically on certain scale or whatever. And so you have an idea of how to obfuscate it. You know how to add noise to it. But then when you come into this text domain, um, I could write an entire paragraph about something, and say, for example, you want to hide the fact that in this huge body of text, there is a record of pregnant women, for example, and you want to hide the information that this lady is pregnant, this lady is not. So you're just trying to hide the pregnancy status of all those women mentioned in that paragraph. But it's not so straightforward, right? The text itself, it doesn't have to be like, okay, so and so is 3 months pregnant. It could also be something very, very indirect, that so and so went shopping for maternity clothes or things like that. So there,
Right.
because of the context, and also because of not having clear distinctions between people's data, it's a huge mess. Just because that's how the text domain is, that you could make these inferences which come from the semantics of the knowledge graph or of the semantics of the language itself, and that could reveal private information which is not explicit, so the machine learning model might not be able to catch that. But an adversary model will be able to catch that. And then it could be mixed up. Like, you could, if you're referring to she in a passage, it could refer to any of the women who you've previously spoken about, right? It doesn't have to correspond to a single person. And it's easier for us to figure that out, but it can be harder for language models to pick up these context-based clues. So that's sort of the language, or just the base aspect of the challenge of working with privacy in language. And then the other part is that since it's not numerical, the only approach that we have remaining is adding noise prior to training or after training, which is not going to give you the same strong guarantees as during training. If you are adding noise prior to training, you're going to have to add too much noise. But if you're adding noise after training, then your model is still susceptible to attacks. So there are all these modes of operation that you have to
Nuances.
consider. Yeah. And when if you're starting to add noise in the embedding space itself, then that could have disastrous results. Like, it could really mess up your embeddings. The impact of you adding noise to an embedding could be much, much more than what you wanted it to be.
And how
So
do you even evaluate
things like
such
that.
things, right? The effect of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
changes, that becomes a
That too, yeah. Like, how it's really hard to evaluate as well. Yeah.
this actually, is firing thoughts in my mind, because what you're talking about right now, this is very, very contextual to what is in vogue today, right? LLMs.
Yeah.
If you think about it, they've been trained on web scale data. That
Yeah.
is, it is the language domain, the text domain. They rely heavily on semantics. They being increasingly being used in tasks where, yeah, they're used to solve like problems which rely on semantics rather than simply the syntactic part of the problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this is the place where this kind of bias or lack of privacy will sort of come out, will sort of shine, to for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on this? Like, is there some common, like, class of problems that has already been identified and that is being worked on, or is this consciously being even considered right now in literature or in
Right.
academia in general?
So since the whole GPT launch, and I was at MSR at the same time, prior to that, I was working on some privacy projects which were general in machine learning. But since the whole LLM thing happened, the GPT thing, even my research agenda and almost everybody's research agenda at MSR completely got rerouted. So I've been working on privacy in the context of GPT, and there it the interesting thing about academic literature around GPT right now is that there are a lot of low-hanging fruits at the moment, because it's just new, it's just not done. So people will go and they will compose two really simple things and they'll publish a paper out of it. And I mean, you could say that maybe it's a bad thing, but it's also necessary. Somebody has to publish the first paper in that subfield, so that more improvisations on top of that can happen. So the things that I've seen is that there's been one work which is privacy for in-context learning, and now another project that's being worked on at MSR is privacy for retrieval augmented generation. And I think the biggest challenge with privacy for GPT or for LLMs, which are actually being used right now, is for most people, the LLM is going to be a black box for most
Hmm.
users. 99.99% of the users, the LLM itself is going to be a black box. And it is already trained on a lot of public data. And just because data is public doesn't mean it's not revealing private information. So you can't really go into the depths of the model. You can't really make changes to the model itself. So the approach for privacy now in context of LLMs has become what can you do before and what can you do after. So say you're working with an LLM, a black box LLM, and you want to maybe find a way to fine tune it through prompt engineering. So what are the
Yeah.
kind of prompts that you can give, and what kind of meta prompts that you can give about privacy, which can actually help it produce more private results? Or say you had like you could make many queries to a LLM Oracle. Then if say you got 10 outputs to a query, then given these 10 outputs to the query, how can you like mix and match to come up with a private mix of which is the final output? So most of the work now for LLMs and for GPT is coming up with privacy layers prior or after. And yeah, the whole confusion around GPT and how it's going to change research and things like that, I'm just as in the dark as anybody else. I'm really not in the place where I have that kind of vision to understand how things are going to change in the next 5 years or 10 years. But I do feel like NLP research itself will be pretty maybe silent for some time until it finds what are the capabilities that LLMs are really not doing well and figure that why that's happening,
Makes
and
sense. Right.
what other complementary approaches are there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is because even with my experience with LLMs has been recently that, like, because I'm
yeah,
like in the past couple of months also, like the work has completely pivoted towards, like we were using LLMs before, but
yeah,
right now, like, because of the publicity that it gets, obviously, right, everyone's trying to basically be the be the first, basically innovate before your
yeah,
competition. And
yeah,
while you're using LLMs on a regular basis, right, one of the problems that you're mentioning that does come up quite a bit, especially the hallucination bit and the privacy aspect of it, because you see
yeah,
that while the model is hallucinating, you see people's names coming up in that, or email IDs which are coming up. Of course, I've not gone and tried to check if they're existing emails of
right,
people or the contact details, but
yeah,
yeah, if you think about it, that's sort of scary, right? Because your data is out there publicly. Maybe it's been
yeah,
trained on somewhere, and maybe in some other context, in some other scenario where you don't even think of it, the model is trying to solve a problem. It's just been employed there, and your data is spit out to a random
yeah,
stranger.
yeah,
And that's a really sort of what should I say, sobering thought when you realize that something like that, with the power of such
yeah,
things, well, and the level of abstraction that is there in today's models.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like privacy will always be important, no matter where the machine learning field or any other like adjacent field is headed. There will always be a need for privacy. So even in terms of like a career choice, I feel like moving to these aspects where you're trying to enhance the trustworthiness of these machine learning models, whether it's privacy or confidentiality or fairness or robustness or all these aspects, all these maybe axes of evaluation of the machine learning model. I feel like those are always going to be worthwhile pursuits, because if you really want to build real world ML systems, you need all of these in place, and you'll never lose a job if you're working in these kind of fields. Is what I think. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And because
Yeah, it
there's sort
does.
of
It does make
catching,
sense.
there's also a lot of catching
Yeah.
up that regulation has to do, right? Because this is something which is pretty nascent, and maybe you as a researcher, because you've been dealing with this kind of things, slash privacy in general. What are your thoughts on like kind of what kind of regulation do you think? First of all, there is regulation needed, and second thing, what kind of should I say processes are already afoot? Like maybe different organizations are thinking about it. They're investing time and sort of coming up with policy. Even MSR, maybe they're thinking about these kind of things. Can you shed some light on that, maybe?